Look, if you girls don't settle down, then Shelley can't stay over anymore.
We can't sleep. We keep scaring each other.
Well, why don't you two go sleep in my room for a while?
Okay. Nah, we don't need this.
Guys, welcome to a cobweb-covered classic film review of 1990's Arachnophobia, starring Jeff Daniels, John Goodman and Julian Sands, and directed by Frank Marshall. This is the creepy, crawly story of a small town infested with spiders after a rare species of South American spider finds its way via a coffin to the US and starts to breed. Now, depending on your tolerance for eight-legged arachnids, this film will either be a tongue-in-cheek adventure with the odd jump scare or an out-and-out horror fest. You see, the beauty of this film isn't in having huge CGI beasties crashing about all over the place, but it actually preys on people's very real fears of spiders surprising you by crawling out from underneath the furniture, or those moments where you wander into a load of spider webs. If those kind of things freak you out, then approach this review with caution. Let's take a look. So 1990's Arachnophobia kicks off in a little prologue in the jungles of South America as Julian Sands' Dr. James Atherton leads an expedition to study new species of creepy crawlies and comes across a huge spider. Now, before you can say eight-legged freaks, said spider bites a photographer to death and hitches a ride back home to the old US of A.
Can you give me a hand here? Oh, yeah. Oh, I think I'll go move the hearse.
Now, clearly in the mood for some romance, this highly venomous critter nips into a nearby barn and mates with one of those big garden variety spiders you find in barns and sheds, etc. Anyway, soon enough, the barn is consumed with egg sacs and webs, and it won't be long before the newborns burst forth and explore the town. Now, I still remember my trip to my local cinema to see Arachnophobia when it was released in the January of 1991. Anyone watching from the United States, you guys got to see this in the summer of 1990. And it's pretty freaky for what is essentially a PG movie. But watching it back now, you can also see a lot of the humour and tongue-in-cheek moments that probably went over my head when I was a 10-year-old.
What is it?
It's hard to say. Would anybody object if I tore this floor out?
I would.
False alarm, then lead on.
Now, of course, the first joke of the film is that our hero, played by Jeff Daniels, does in fact suffer from arachnophobia, brought on from some childhood trauma. Here he's the new doctor in town, looking forward to a quiet life after the pressures of big city life. Well, he's in for a shock because before long, there's a series of sudden deaths in this small New England town, and they need to call in the experts. So far, so Jaws, right? Now, in fact, on closer inspection, the setup here is very, very similar to Spielberg's Shark masterwork. We have Jeff Daniels as the Chief Brody-esque everyman who's recently moved into a small town. We have Julian Sands playing the Hooper role as the expert on hand to spout science jargon to us. And we have John Goodman's grizzled exterminator kind of in the Quint role.
Sustained over a dozen bites and lived. Of course, he permanently lost control of all of his bodily functions. There's no spider here.
Now, I won't spend a huge amount of time on the cast because this is a spider movie and the arachnids are the stars here, of course, but Daniels does a decent job. Sands' lines, I'm sure, have been just lifted straight out of a biology textbook.
And that each spider eats about 100 insects per year. That means at least 5 million insects are consumed per acre annually. Well, think about it, Doctor.
And John Goodman is the comic relief exterminator on hand so things don't get too serious for the kids.
Yeah, that's right. I'm bad.
Now, what arachnophobia is, or what it does well, should I say, it is gather together a greatest hits of spider-related spooky situations. Those little moments that make even the non-arachnophobes have a tiny little shiver. Moments like having a spider crawl into a football helmet before a player unwittingly puts it on his head. Spiders crawling into your shoes before you slip your foot inside. Spiders waiting until you turn the lamp off before dropping down onto your hand. And that spider in the shower scene. The filmmakers assemble these encounters gradually before unleashing spider apocalypse in the final act. Now, arachnophobia might be a little too slow burn for some, and the creature feature genre is a tricky one to get right. For me, Jaws is obviously the pinnacle, and the only way to go after that has been the largely tongue-in-cheek efforts like Deep Blue Sea and the Meg films. Similarly, after this came the carnage of Eight-Legged Freaks, which is great fun, but not grounded in the same mostly realistic tone. Now, by all accounts, this film began life as a more serious horror movie, but certainly became Spielbergified along the way. So Arachnophobia was directed by Frank Marshall, here making his feature film debut. Now, Marshall worked with Steven Spielberg for years, producing films like Raiders of the Lost Ark, Who Framed Roger Rabbit, and this film has many a Spielberg touch. It has that family horror vibe, spooky but not terrifying, jumpy but not gratuitous with its shocks. Marshall, of course, would go on to make the Andes crash drama Alive and the brilliantly daft Congo. Now, what impresses me mostly these days is how much of an absolute nightmare this must have been to make. These days, of course, it's guaranteed that all these spiders would be conjured up via CGI. Here, though, there were spider wranglers and experts on set, I'm assuming, herding the little eight-legged stars around locations. Incidentally, the spiders used in the film were Avondale spiders from New Zealand, harmless, but they certainly look menacing enough. And of course there is some animatronic action with the Big Daddy Spider, certainly in the film's barn set, cobweb covered nest climax. Now, speaking of which, the film looks fantastic. It was shot by Danish cinematographer Michael Solomon, who also shot The Abyss for James Cameron and Backdraft the year after this. Here, scenes like the opening Venezuela prologue and some of the cobweb-covered barn shots look amazing. So Arachnophobia is now 30 odd years old and is most certainly a classic in the creature feature subgenre. Essentially a B-movie with some Hollywood names involved. Its association with Amblin and Spielberg certainly helped it on its way. It opened third behind Ghost and Die Hard 2 in the summer of 1990. And it still holds up now. Its terror is less reliant on cheap jump scares and loud noises, but by simply preying on your primal fear of spiders and where you might encounter one next. A little bit like that John Williams music when you find yourself in the water. Try not to think of this film the next time you go into your shed or attic. Go check it out.